Well, people, it's official. Mike Vrabel is the new head coach of the New England Patriots, and you should be ecstatic about this. This is essentially the coach that you wanted Gerard Mayo to develop into years down the line. And now you don't have to put up with the 1, 2, 3 more stinker years it would have taken him to become a Mike Vrabel, an experienced head coach with a winning culture. You just pretty much cut the line and fast forwarded your franchise into the future, and you got a built-in winner with a built-in culture and an absolute superstar head coach, I think, in Mike Vrabel. Welcome in, everyone. This is the Patriots Pod. I'm Will. We're going to be talking offseason, new Vrabel hires, personnel department, draft, all of it. So if you're into that stuff, Patriots content, subscribe below, like this video. You know the drill, all that good stuff. So Mike Vrabel, the finished culture builder, is in New England. Now, I know he was kind of the belle of the ball along with Ben Johnson. We talked about the two. And personally, I think he went the right direction here. I think the Crafts really didn't want to whiff on a rookie head coach again. I think they were really reluctant to take that risk, even though there is obviously the higher ceiling with a guy like Ben Johnson. Don't get me wrong, he might go to the right situation this offseason, might go to Chicago and become the next Sean McVay. Who knows? I think he has a great offensive mind, is a great play caller. But for the Patriots' current situation, you needed stability, you needed culture. And when you're moving on from Gerard Mayo and taking that full measure, you really can't go back in the rookie bag and try to grab the right fish out of the barrel, so to speak, metaphorically. Who knows what I'm trying to say there? But you needed stability. You didn't want to repeat with another rookie head coach. And I think you get a guy in Mike Vrabel with a higher floor than Ben Johnson, someone who can address the defense, which has now become a problem. And I do think that although Drake and Ben Johnson would work great together, I think Drake May is going to develop really well on his own, no matter who you bring in as a play caller and no matter who the offensive mind is. So I honestly think the offense will just kind of snowball into shape as you kind of saw it happening this year with the emergence of Kayshon Boutte, obviously Demario Douglas developing. If you could get a run game in there and bring in sort of that Vrabel Patriots of old, tough, smart, dependable football, and you maybe bring in a guy like Josh McDaniels to scheme up some play action shots, to do that whole thing, you'll see Drake develop just fine on his own. I think right now, honestly, the most pressing concern has become the defense. And here you bring in a defensive-minded guy who's going to sort of, I'm not going to compare him to Mike Tomlin, but he has that higher floor, win those close games vibe to him that Gerard Mayo really didn't. You were hoping that he would develop, right, into a coach who was preaching Patriot football, smart, dependable, penalty-free. And honestly, down the stretch, we saw the opposite of that from the likes of Adarian Lowe, Demontre Jacobs. I mean, every single game, you turn on the fucking Patriots, it's the same story every time. So Vrabel gets away from that. He's a guy who's obviously had coaching success. I mean, he brought a Tennessee Titans team led by Ryan Tannehill to the AFC Championship. He pretty much dethroned Brady in the wild card game here, ended your dynasty. He, at some point, earned the 1 seed as well. I think one and done that year by a Lamar Jackson-led Ravens team who was making their playoff push for the first time. But I really do think that I think it was like 6 close one-score games this season. Not that the Patriots were going to have a competitive year this year, but when you have 6 one-score or close games, like the game in Seattle, obviously you win the opener and you're feeling good, but then you have the game in Seattle where you kind of have some blown calls down the stretch that lose you that game in overtime. There were 6 games that were close under Gerard Mayo during his tenure, and you lost all of them. And I think there was 9 one-score games under Bill the year prior, and you only got 4 wins that year. So it's kind of been a trend where you're starting to lose those close one-score games where you play fundamentally sound football that you used to win. And it was also one of the first things to hear Vrabel say during his presser, which, by the way, he was so comfortable in. I mean, night and day from when you saw Gerard here last year. He, obviously knew a lot of the beat reporters, knew his way around the building, but just so comfortable answering questions and going into detail about his vision for this team, something you did not see much from Gerard Mayo. He just seems so prepared, and this seems like such a slam dunk hire. But what I was going to get into was those closer games, I think you're going to see Gerard, or the way that Gerard couldn't sort of take advantage of bad football. One of the first things that he said during his presser was, we're first going to get good enough to take advantage of bad football. And that's the way the Patriots used to play, right? Bill's old saying of, you can't win until you stop beating yourself, or you can't win until you stop losing. That was always, the backup phrase to do your job and the Patriot way. And this is kind of just a retooling of a lot of those Belichick ideas. But those Belichick ideas were a little outdated. He wasn't connecting with the players. He was drafting terribly. And I think this is sort of just like a Belichickian coach with a facelift that is younger, understands offense a little bit better, understands how to connect with, the players of this generation, and also blending that with accountability, dependability. And I think, something that started to plague the Patriots was guys like Jalen Polk, even in the coaching staff, like Gerard Mayo, thinking that he was going to have this long runway to fail and learn from his failures. I mean, I think he thought he was going to have 3 years to turn the ship around here. And within the first, he's gone. So I think there was a lot of that lack of accountability and just thinking you have, just the who the F do you think you are mindset that you need to approach Jalen Polk with this offseason, and other guys like that who are just underperforming and think that, oh, I can just go through the motions here. I think Vrabel's going to come in here, establish a culture that is going to rid this team of that stuff and really put them back on the right track. So there was a really interesting thing that came out from Taylor Lewan, his old left tackle in Tennessee, warning the players, essentially saying, like, your a-hole is going to be extremely tight during every team meeting because he's going to expect you to know this about that player. He's going to expect you to know the person in the cafeteria, all the assistant coaches, this person on that team, how many years that guy's been in the league, where he played ball, and just being overly prepared is going to be part of the Mike Vrabel experience. And that was, preached to be the Gerard Mayo experience, but we saw week after week an underprepared football team repeating mistakes, and the Crafts had seen enough to the point where they were able to move off him after a year. I know that's old news now. It's still shocking to me to really go through the timeline of, selecting him as a successor and then a year later moving off him. And I think it was a great move because it's only so often you get a coaching candidate floating into your lap like Mike Vrabel. This guy has so much experience and a winning head coach. That is so rare. Now I'll get into the offense for a sec. I think Drake May, no matter who his offensive coordinator is, will elevate the play caller, right? We saw it this year with Alex Van Pelt, who was essentially a first-time full-on play caller, and really did not do a good job, about as mid a job as you could ever imagine for an OC. However, Drake, once he started starting, really elevated the team's offense, and you started seeing some explosive plays that you really have not seen here since Brady. And I think no matter who you bring in to replace AVP, likely going to be Josh McDaniels, I think Drake and that offensive play caller will develop really well on their own. And I think it was the defense that right now needed assistance. And you have a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Vrabel who can focus on that and sort of allow the offense and Drake May to develop on the back burner. But that back burner is obviously going to be burning really bright with a young stud like Drake May. And I will say, Drake has been open about the way he loves to be coached hard, right? He's that old school guy, and he's not a Caleb Williams who's going to be like complaining about hard coaching or complaining about the offensive line or pointing fingers. Drake has been A+, A+++ at the podium. Like, such a natural born leader, great locker room guy. And I think pairing that sort of personality with an old school style of hard coaching and being fundamentally sound and efficient on offense in Mike Vrabel, it's going to be a perfect marriage. And I would love to see Drake May and Mike Vrabel just grow old together here next 20 years, run it back, 6 more rings. I'm kidding. Don't get ahead of yourself. But I really could see this being really the three-headed monster in stable management with the Crafts and good ownership. Mike Vrabel, who's an experienced winning head coach with good culture. Drake May, a young superstar quarterback, obviously a shit ton of money and a 4th overall pick who might turn into an Abdul Carter or a stud wide receiver in T-Mac. Maybe even, obviously, Travis Hunter might fall. We'll see. We'll cover the draft later. But you're in a really good spot all of a sudden compared to, I mean, imagine if you were just running it back with Mayo, how bad you would feel right now. Just like, I mean, what did he prove? What did he prove? Nothing. So he had to go. There was no choice. I think they're going to clean house. I think DeMarcus Covington's just kind of hanging out to go through some of these motions because someone has to be running the team at this point in the year. I mean, there has to be someone executing some player personnel decisions, some visions for next year, some draft analysis. There needs to be people in the building. And I think that's Elliott Wolf as well. Everyone's all up in arms. Why are you keeping Elliott Wolf? Guys, Vrabel's going to have final say over all of this. He's essentially the new czar, and he's already brought in another player personnel guy from, he knew from Tennessee who was working in New York, and to sort of share duties already with Elliott. So Elliott's already getting more company, more help, and then Mike is going to be contributing on his own, to the whole process, free agency, draft, scouting, all of it. And we now get to see Elliott Wolf's new scouting plan finally develop, because last year, apparently, they were having to use the sort of scouting rituals that were in place from Bill still, because they'd been scouting under Bill that whole year for that draft, which led to whiffing on Polk and maybe Baker and Caden Wallace. Layden Robinson might be a whiff. I mean, seriously, the only guy you pulled out that's been a star has been Drake May. And honestly, thank God we at least have that. To wrap up here, I'm really going to just talk about how I think Vrabel is going to turn this franchise around. This franchise has been really directionless since 2019. You go through the Cam Newton years, which is just a bridge year, failure. Mac Jones has a really bright year with Josh McDaniels, so credit to him. Could Josh come in here and work with Drake May and elevate him even further? I mean, could we see that second-year jump from Drake May that everyone talks about with rookie QBs? Could it be with Josh McDaniels by his side where he starts to enter top 10, maybe even top 5 QB in the league conversation? We saw that happen pretty quickly with Herbert, and personally, I like Drake May's skill set and rate of development at the moment more than Herbert. I think we remember Mac Jones' rookie year when Mac Jones went to LA and beat Herbert, outplayed him. Now, I know it's the comp that Drake May gets. I'm not going to get into the May versus Herbert conversation right now, but you're in a really good spot with a bright young QB is the point. And now you have a really stable, smart, dependable, and most importantly, experienced head coach in Mike Vrabel. You are just, night and day in a better position than where you were this time last year. You didn't even know if you were going to hit on Drake May. You were cutting Mac Jones or sending him to Jacksonville. You had admitted your failures with him. You're really on the upswing. Despite hitting rock bottom this season, and firing Gerard Mayo meant you had to hit rock bottom. That was not going to happen unless you hit rock bottom, which you did. And that brings you to this point where you can really start to feel the franchise turning already under his leadership. I think he's going to turn things around. He's going to have us playing, again, just fundamentally sound defense and efficient offense. So let me know in the comments who you guys want the hires to be for offensive and defensive coordinators. Let me know if there's anyone on your mind you think as the clear favorite for that number 4 overall draft pick, if they're there. I'd love to hear you guys' feedback on any videos you want to see. We're going to be doing some draft coverage. I'm going to bring some people in to do a little joint video with me. That'll be a little later, but for now, let's keep talking about the Vrabel plan. So hopefully in my next video, we're announcing and talking about who the Patriots offensive coordinator is. And again, it feels like the obvious choice to land on is Josh McDaniels, the same way that the obvious hire here felt like Vrabel, and that's what they went with. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Josh back here in Foxborough, leading Drake May, hopefully on a little bit of a 8-win season, 9-win. Maybe you're competing for playoffs late in the year. You want to be playing those games that matter. Anyways, this is huge news. The new era has begun. Thank you guys for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.